Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, your king, King Clifford Jefferson, descendant of Godfrey the Fifth Caliban Jew. I'm the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, who you know as Jesus Christ. And it's a privilege to be able to personify and incarnate or incorporate whatever term you use in that petition, in that particular tenure or holding or office. I'm thankful to be here amongst my body of politics, my queen, my officers, as well as members and subjects. I'm going to be short for the sake of the class, and I'm going to let my queen say a couple of words, as well as every member of the English Church. Just make it short so that we can get on with this marvelous lesson. I digress. Queen.
Greetings. Hope everyone had a blessed week. Just want to give honors to the King and all the members on the King's Bench panel today. Giving honors to you all. I just want to say status is very important. Back in the day, you had the king, you had the queen, the barons, and all those other people of a society that upheld, what they believed in and their policies and their laws, but they always had status, which is very important. I say that to say I went to an event last night at my niece's house, and all women.
There's a lot of.
And she had this party on a yearly basis, but she called it her sisterhood party. And it brought tears to my eyes how all these women just got together. No men was there, just all sisters bonding, sharing with each other, all their issues that they have on a daily basis. But the one thing that they had missing was the church. They had the church, but not from the standpoint that we're coming from, and so, we're building, and, status is so important because in the midst of all that was going on, I wore my turban there. I was the only one there with a turban on my head, but it felt good just to bond and, get together with everybody. And with that, I digress.
Well said, Queen. Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont.
Once again, greetings, everyone. First, I want to go ahead and give honors to our King Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet, as well as Queen Godwinson. Without our king and queen, we can't have our body politic. We just run around like chickens with our heads cut off. But today is August 14, 2972, which is the Berber calendar, which is equivalent to the 2022 Gregorian calendar. And it's like we say all the time here at the Third Temple English Church of England, it is great to be amongst family, those who are going through the trials and tribulations together, so that way we can come out unscathed, and without pressure, diamonds cannot be created. So what we're going through right now, and it's only going to turn us into some of the most magnificent beings that you ever seen walk on the face of this planet. And like we said, we're going to do it together. So with that being said, I digress and look forward to this beautiful, magnificent lesson that the King has brought together, because after this one, I'm quite sure all of y'all going to start running home. I digress.
Well said,
Well said, brother.
Greetings, good to see Murphy from the House of Murphy. Good morning.
Greetings, King. Greetings, Queen. Greetings, Council.
Brother
Forgive
Murphy.
me, I'm traveling, so I'm here with you in spirit, but I'm gonna be here quiet and listening to this marvelous lesson. Forgive me, I'm traveling, but I'm with you all. I love you all.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Safe travel.
Greetings, Brother Burgess from the House of Burgess.
Greetings, family. I really don't always have.
Stop that shyness, man.
I appreciate everybody here, and I love the fellowship. I love the communion to get me ready throughout the week. So I'm here. I'm ready.
Well said. We appreciate you. Countess Walker. Greetings, Countess.
Greetings, King. Greetings, Queen.
Greetings, Countess Walker.
Greetings, Archbishop. Greetings, CA. Greetings, everyone who's here. I had a wonderful week. I had a great discussion with King and Archbishop, and it made me very happy. So I'm always looking forward to the lessons. I'm always looking forward to studying. I'm so happy. I'm an English woman. I'm so happy about the common law, and there's nothing else to say. We've been getting prepared for this time, and when you look around, that's what it's all about. Our kingdom, and the English are here. So
I like that.
I regret.
I like that. I like that. I like how you just said that and you kept it within your body of politics. I love that. That's what's up. Well said.
Well said.
Greetings, Sister Walker from the House of Walker. How you doing this morning? Countess Walker. I apologize. Sister Alice. I cannot get you two. Y'all two like two peas in pod to me, so y'all gotta forgive me.
That's okay, King. Greetings, King. Greetings, Queen. Greetings, Archbishop, BA, all the members of the panel. Glorious day. It's wonderful to be here. Always happy to fellowship and just share like minds. On Thursday, we had a marvelous lesson class. We just went a little bit deeper into the King's two bodies, and I just want to say, for the clarity, it definitely makes a difference in your level of understanding and where you go from here. And Queen, I just wanted to say, sisterhood is extremely important in our times. The brothers pretty much have it down packed. They can come together and do things that they need to do, but the sisters are always at odds. So right now is the time when we need each other the most to come together and really get a thorough understanding of this English history, English law, English understanding, and it's a blessing to see. And I digress. Thank you.
Well said, Sister Alice from the House of House.
Lady Alice.
Greetings, Sister Militant from the House of Militant. Greetings this fine morning.
Greetings to you, King. Greetings to you, Queen, to the King's bench. Welcome, everyone. I had a very good weekend. It was interesting. A neighbor in my neighborhood was honored for his work in the media. And the mayor came out. His name was Bill McCrary. He did a lot of work in the 70s and 80s with bringing in news, especially a lot of community news. So they named the street after him. And as I think about it, is that, our perception of the King of England is a level of consciousness. And where I live in Queens, I am in Wales and England in terms of the name St. Albans, and I live in Cambria Heights. So it's really just a question of perception. And as I'm listening to the lessons and getting a deeper understanding of the times that we're in and what we're trying to manifest, everything is conversion. The timelines are coming together. And I really appreciate you all. And I'm very grateful to be here. And I digress.
Well said, Sister Militant from the House of Militant. Greetings, Brother Mean from the House of Means. Good to see you this morning, brother. Usually you're at work, so I'm glad you found the time to be able to navigate your way back here to the King's bench today to be present to this marvelous lesson. Greetings.
Grand Rising King, Grand Rising Queen, Grand Rising Archbishop, CA. Yes, it was a marvelous week at work. We worked last night, but I was refreshed. I'm energized just knowing what type of lesson might come today, because we've been going over the lesson from last week all week. And as I mentioned before, Brother Gray and I, we talk every week, if not every day, and we be going back and forth. And every time we find a jewel, it seemed like we couldn't get past just the beginning of the lesson, because that's the part I missed. It was so exciting to know that as we come together as one, there's no stopping. And as you mentioned, they're going to find little tactics to try to delay what's coming forth or has already been present. So it's always an exciting time to see your marvelous faces and receive this information that makes it applicable in our today's time. And the camelback off of what the councilors were saying is that where we are is a perception and what we see ourselves as. We were always raised to hold your head up high, chest out, shoulders back, and walk with pride. But now it's a different sense of pride, knowing that the comfort that we have and has always been here, but to come into this light is even more tremendous, and we appreciate. And I digress.
Well said, Brother Minnie from the House of Men. Brother Gray, good morning, Noble. Good to have you here.
Greetings, King and Queen, and all on the King's bench. I'm gonna try to keep it brief. I'm at work today, but I'm still here, and I'm still here in heart and mind. I'm just looking so forward to this lesson. Like Brother Meme say, we talk about this all the time, almost every day. And the last lesson was just extraordinary. I mean, I'm still pulling out pieces the more I read it and read back over my notes. So I'm going to digress because I just want to get into this lesson.
Well said, brother. We thank you for that beautiful synopsis on your intake on the previous lessons. I'm pretty sure today would do just justice. Greetings, brother Scott from the House of Scott. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good, King. Always a pleasure to see you and the Queen, of course. Both archbishops, always render my respect to those young men for what they do. Everybody else on the panel, all the young ladies. Really don't have much to say, King. I'm just looking forward to it. This is just about becoming to be our daily bread. So I'm looking forward to getting full off of it. I really appreciate everything you do, and thank you for the guidance and the leadership. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You might have a little bit more left over than the usual amount. So I hope y'all got y'all, in lack of a better term, a doggy bag. Hey, it's about to be fulfilled. So without that further ado, let's get started. Once again, I just thank you guys, brothers and sisters, countesses, officers, for being studious. From what we do thus far, from this Third Temple English Church, i.e. the King's Bench, is paramount, or is rooted in the last lesson, the King's two bodies. That's just very important. We have got two narratives, actually three narratives from the perspective of the King's two body, which was Kanarovich, which was American German, as well as Edmund Bowden and Edward Cope, which were jurists. These are masters in regards to understanding the opinions in reference to the sole corporation or corporation sole, which in legal terms is called the crown. And so I can't wait to give you all this upper room information. And like I said, I'll do so as I see fit, as the Spirit moving. So with that, I digress, and I'll let Archbishop speak before I go into this marvelous lesson.
Oh, point of interest, Brother Walthor was on. He'll probably return, so that way he can do his intro.
Yes, I apologize.
He's not in right now, but oh, here he comes. He just came back in. All right, there it is.
Right, I was there.
Sorry.
Greetings, Brother Walthor from the House of Walthor. I was looking for you,
brother.
But I didn't see the name. I'm like, I knew I forgot somebody. All right,
No,
greetings,
my computer had shut off for a second there, but greetings, King, Queen, King's Bench, everyone. I've been in moving mode, so it's been a little difficult for me to attend, but I was there last week, and I really appreciated the information that was discussed, and I'm looking forward to the second part today, which is very, I know it's going to be very important. So, but I did want to say something. Sister Middleton said some really great things after the call last week, and I've been kind of emotional about some things she said. So, but she was like on point with everything she spoke about. And Sister Allen spoke last week as well, and it was very touching just to know that I share some of the same intimates that she went through as a young adolescent coming up. So, you know, I think we all have very similar backgrounds in growing up. And I guess that's why we're all here. The ancestors wanted to make sure that we all came together and were able to put things back in perspective. So, King, you've done that. Queen, you've done that. Archbishops, you're doing a fabulous job. So just continue, and just proud of everybody. So I digress.
Thank you, Brother Walthor from House of Walthor. And I promise I, your king and my queen, will not fail you. Once again, we have our ancestors bringing this history to you because they never left. We just left it. And now we have returned. And it's our obligation to live it like we breathe it. And we breathe it like we talk it. If we don't talk it, then we can't breathe it. If we don't breathe it, we can't live it because we continue to be dead. So without that, let's get moving. All right. Let's see where I'm going with this.
Yes, friend.
Yes, give me 1 second. King's two bodies. Screen is trying to load. Screen. Everybody safe?
Yes.
All those online, please pay very close attention. This is pre-information that we gave you. Once again, this lesson is entitled, where is the legality in your theology? What is the law supporting your relationship to your God? What is the legal ground for the inheritance that was promised from your Lord? Where is your heaven on earth? So when you watch this lesson, please consider all the facts that I bring to you. None is based off philosophy. None is based off theology. None is based off folklore. All this is based off facts. Legal, sound facts that were already interpreted by masters qualifying what the English stereotypical church have done. We have only received the theosophical aspect of what we have done based off legal grounds. Now that's quite accomplished for any body of politics. Any body of politics, and we're going to prove it today. So without further ado, let's get started. We already talked about the king's two bodies in reference to the instrument that the king in relation to the body of politics. We know that the natural body and the body politics is one. The natural body and the body politics is one because the natural body suffers the frailties of a human being, but the body politics is immortal, it's forever. It has to remain because the seat automatically transfers by operation of law. This is why we call operation of soul, just like pretty much like a birthright. So now we're going to stay on focus here so everybody can follow along. This is the King Two Bodies, a study of medieval political theology. So political goes into the body of politics, and theology deals with the abstract, dealing with their concept, focusing on God. This is a historical book written by Ernest Kantorowicz, and it concerns medieval political theology and the distinction separating the body natural, as I just stated, which is subject to the encumbrances that natural people go through. You get hurt, you go through pain, you know, you're emotional, you're happy, you're sad, you grieve, etc. But the body politic doesn't. The body politics is there to make sure that all the negative aspects of the degree that the natural body go through are for the goodness of the people and not for the negativeness of the people. Everybody, that makes sense to everybody.
Follow.
Because if the law in the body politics is not benefiting the emotional aspect of us, then that means that ain't a good body of politics, which is the condition of those identified as Negro, Black, colored, and Ethiopian. contrast to all those other people that were subject to some type of body politics, where the contrast side was beneficial, happiness, economics, security, security of their well-being, etc. So there's a lot you can receive from a body of politics. And it says here, in concerning medieval political theology and the distinction separating the body natural and a minor corporal being and the body of politics. Let's just get a reiteration of what that is. The body of politics is a polity, such as a city, realm, or state. So a city, a realm, or a state, as well as a realm is a kingdom. So a city, a state, and a realm or a kingdom or an empire, whatever you call it, has their own body of politics. The word body means the whole aspect of all those who make up that body, i.e. citizens. That makes sense to everybody.
Follow.
And in the abstract world, it's considered metaphorically as the physical body. Historically, the sovereign is typically portrayed as the body's head, and the analogy may also be extended to other anatomical parts, as in political reading of astral fables of the belly and the members. Let's go down a little further. In Latin Europe, very important, the body politics took on a jurisprudential significance by being identified with the legal theory of the corporation, gaining salience or speed or gaining more recognition in the political thought from the 13th century on. In English law, the image of the body politics developed into the theory of the king's two bodies, the crown as a corporation soul. So two different types of body politics are being talked about: the corporation body politics and the corporation soul, better known as the crown. Makes sense to everybody?
Follow.
Okay. This is being qualified by three masters: Kantorowicz, Edmund Plowden, and Edward Cope. We went through that through the last lessons. For all those who viewing, please view the last podcast so you can get that history that you missed, so that when you review this one, you'll be right on point. For the sake of time, let's move forward. Here we have another synopsis in regards to the king's two bodies. This was created by Karen Karkol, and she speaks about the king's two bodies in regards to the body of politics, which make reference to King Edgar the Peaceful, which I find very extraordinary, because they said that the king's two bodies, which originated with Edmund Plowden, who was subject to the teachings of Henry VIII from the House of Tudors. Now, we went over in our last videos the Statute of Restraint of Appeals of 1532, which spoke about that England was an empire and that the king was head of that empire and had his own body of politics, and that all those temporary spirituality was supposed to be confused with that body of politics of the king, and that anything that is not construed to the body of politics of that kingdom of England under the kingdom is notwithstanding in its entirety. Everybody remember that Statute of Restraint?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So now this all deals with the king's two bodies. So now we're going to start from here. Sister Allen, do you mind doing the justice?
I do not mind.
Thank you.
Instead, their central concern is with epitaphic process and exchange and reckoning, enabling them to acknowledge the limitations and vulnerabilities of earthly power, as in the death of Edgar, and the failings of the dead subject, as well as their virtues and achievements. The idea of weighing up and of distance and detached evaluation seems even more prominent in the manuscripts of the Northern Recension, perhaps to be expected due to their different point of view in terms of region and historic moment. Overall, these epitaphic passages on Edgar as for the reader's reckoning and judgment, but also for generosity and respect. All epitaphic writings ask the reader to reflect upon himself as well as the dead subject memorialized in the text. Yet this dynamic is even more acute in the case of an epitaph on a ruler. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles poetic epitaph for kings do additional ideological work in terms of the processes of reckoning and judgment they invite from the reader. Recent studies by Catherine Karkov have explored the concept of the king's two bodies, calling attention to the ways in which contemporary representations of Edgar suggest the symbolic association between the body of the king and that of the wider nation. In her examination of the frontispiece to the Regularis Concordia, in her book, The Ruler Portrait of Anglo-Saxon England, Karkov suggests that its depiction of Edgar's body, interrected by a horizontal scroll, suggests its dual nature as both human, earthly, and material, as well as sacral and symbolic of eternal, divinely anointed power and authority. Karkov nuances this reading in her latest essay, The Frontispiece to the New Minister Charter and the King's Two Bodies, arguing instead that the king's dual identity is at once individual and corporate, and considering how the king's body might have come to stand not just for the man himself, but for the church he refounded, and ultimately, by extension, for the nation itself. The poetic epitaphs for Edgar and other rulers in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle represent textual sites of interment and commemoration where the king's body is symbolically cited and contemplated.
Stop right there. So it said King Edgar the Peaceful refounded, and that's where the king's two bodies originated in reference to the body of politics that other ones in the future use as a measuring or as a template. Because we see Carnovich, a modern day master scholar, make a reference to Edmund Plowden and Edward Coke, who were master scholars of Henry the Tudors, of the Henry VIII from the House of Tudors, who hid the stories going back to the king's two bodies, going back to King Edgar the Peaceful. And Catherine Karkov, a modern day master scholar, makes mention of what they call the new minister charters and the front piece. Now let's take a look at that minister's charter. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
You can read, Sister Walker from the House of Walker.
The Minister Charter is an Anglo-Saxon illuminated manuscript that was likely composed by William Ethelwald and presented to the new minister in Winchester by King Edgar in the year 966 AD to commemorate the Byzantine reform. It is now part of the British Library's collection.
All right, stop right there. Now, she just mentioned in that article by Catherine Karkov, the king's two bodies on the front piece of the new minister's charter. This is the new minister's charter.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mary. I mean, the Virgin Mary. That's St. Peter's with the keys. And this is King Edgar the Peaceful with his charter, presenting it to Jesus Christ. Everybody see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now, he's our Jesus Christ. Somebody created a manuscript in regards to information going back to the king's two bodies. Because we know that the Church of England, under the House of Tudors, which influenced the history as well as going back to the king's two bodies, was done by Henry VIII. So we got to go back at that history to clarify how this go wrong. Where did this go wrong in regards to the true history dealing with the Church of England? Because the Church of England, as is under the English Reformation, was done by Roman Catholic Protestants. But the original Church of England was the English church, where it goes back to the monasteries, going back to the monks, going back to King Edgar the Peaceful. Because that's King Edgar the Peaceful right here. The king's two bodies, that means that there must have been the King of England, and there must have been a body of politics going back to the King of England. And that body of politics dealt with the Church of England under the English monarchs, because Henry VIII was a Protestant monarch. Everybody agree?
Follow.
Sitting on the English throne. Okay. Let's backtrack right quick. United States versus Juan Kim Art. Read this right here. United States versus Rhodes. Sister Allen Walker.
In United States versus Rhodes, Mr. Justice Swain, sitting in circuit court, said, all persons born in the allegiance of the king are natural born subjects, and all persons born in the allegiance of the United States are natural born citizens. Birth and allegiance go together. Such is the rule of the common law, and it is the common law of this country, as well as England. We find no warrant for the opinion that this great principle of the common law has ever been changed in the United States. It has always obtained here with the same vigor and subject only to the same exceptions since as before the revolution.
Okay, hold on. All right, now we know in United States versus Juan Kim Art, it says that United States is successor to the crown and is fixed on nationality. And we know as Smith versus Alabama states that there's only one common law, and that's the common law of England. And that was adopted by all the states and provided as their local laws and subject to such alteration as provided by the statute. And in lieu of the provisions of their constitution must be looked at in light of the history of the common law of England. And we all know the common law of England started with Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou. So let's move forward. Sister Militant, you can start here.
One moment. Okay.
1 second, let me find the tell where to go. Start at right here. At the time of the grant. Now they're actually, let me just give you a narrative of this case. This case going back to Benjamin, let me go to the top. This is the town of Paulette in New Hampshire. The party in this case was Benjamin Wentworth. Benjamin Wentworth was a merchant in New Hampshire, right? He was given some land, but the land that was given to him was just based off a grant being given by a grantor. But in lieu of you receiving the grant, there must be conditions made in the language of a grant from the grantor to a beneficiary, which means that there must be an estate set up. In this matter, Benjamin Wentworth's grant then wasn't based off an inherited estate because of the language. So that meant that the grant itself stayed within the hands of the grantor. Now, watch the language of this particular court case. Let me go back to it, 297. Great and read, Sister Militant.
At, at the time of the grant, therefore, there was not only no Church of England established by law, but in the town of Paulette, there was no organ of that or any other church capable of taking the share in question. The grant, of course, could not take effect, and the revolution has rendered it utterly impossible that it ever can take effect agreeably to the intention of the donor.
That's the grantor.
Yes. By the revolution, we have become completely severed from the Church of England as by law established. Individuals and societies may possess the same land, have the same mode of worship, and the same ordinances administered in the same manner, and submit to the same discipline as far as may be effected without the assistance of the civil arm. But this constitutes.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Give me 1 second.
You're right here.
All right.
But
No.
this
Okay.
this constitutes, in the view we are now talking of the subject, similarity, not identity.
You hear that? Similarity, not identity. Once again, similarities, not identity. Continue.
It furnishes no ground for legal derivation of civil or legal connection in every political, civil, and legal view, and in all the civil and legal consequences. The dissolution of the Church of England, as by law established, was in the United States as total and complete on the revolution as that of the civil power of the British government.
Read that again.
In every political, civil, and legal view, and in all the civil and legal consequences, the dissolution of the Church of England, as by law established, was in the United States as total and complete on the revolution as that of the civil power of the British government.
Okay. They said the British government, not the English government. We're talking about the parliament. We're talking about the dissolution of the Church of England. And are we not?
Yes.
Now, everybody knows the Church of England went through a transformation going back to Pope Gregory I, right? Then it was, they went through what they call the dissolution of the monasteries in the 15th century under Henry VIII, which styled himself as the head of the what? Church of England. Am I right?
Right.
Right.
That's the theology concept. But it just said here, it said, in every political, i.e. body of politics, civil and legal view, I mean, from the opinions, from legal judiciary point of view, and in all civil and legal consequences, the dissolution means the dissolving of the Church of England as by law established, was in the United States. Do y'all hear that? So that means the Church of England was not dissolved in England, it was dissolved in the United States. Now, when we read this history, we thinking King Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries in England, and we just reading case law, and it said the Church of England dissolved in the United States. Now, what do they mean by that? Was the United States governed by the Church of England? Yes, it was, because there was not a separation of church and state at that time. It was just the Church of England. So when you're dealing with the Church of England, going back to the reformation of the Church of England, you go back to Henry VIII. The Church of England always existed before Henry VIII. How we know that? They left out English church. Do that make sense?
Follow.
And if they say that the United States was the one who dissolved the Church of England, that meant that the Church of England is right here in the United States. Does that make sense to everybody? From a legal point of view, we ain't talking about theology, philosophical, or an opinion. We talking about from a legal point of view. Why? Because this is case law. This is actual case law that we're talking about. And the case law is about Benjamin Wentworth, who was a merchant. He had nothing to do with the body politics. He had nothing to do with the trust. He had nothing to do with being an English subject. And we talking about the body of politics going back to King Edward the Peaceful. And now we see that the body of politics going back to King Edward the Peaceful was taken by merchants. Because now they're dealing with the body of politics of those who took over our state, which what? The British monarch. Because it said that it wasn't complete until the revolution at that of the civil power of the British government. Who's the British government? Those British monarchs. Who was the first British monarch? Queen Anne. That makes sense to everybody.
Follow.
All right. Don't lose key point over that. Let's move forward.
Okay.
Any questions? Sister Militant?
Nor has there
Oh,
ever...
I'm sorry. No, that's fine. We're moving forward.
Okay.
All right. Now we're going to get another case file right quick. Just read this, Sister Militant. This is Central Railroad versus Jersey City. Go ahead.
Yes, Central Railroad versus Jersey City. Mr. Warren Dixon for defendants in error. It is the settled law of the state of New Jersey that lands underwater within the state limits originally belonged to the state, and that title by holders other than the state is acquired from the state. The title to lands underwater within the present limits of the state were vested in the King of Great Britain at and before the Revolution of 1776, and became vested by the law of nations and by the right of conquest in the people of the then colony and now state of New Jersey by the War of Independence. And they cite, the state of New Jersey was seized in fee simple absolute in the soil covered by the waters of the Hudson River, and the said lands being within the boundaries of the said state were subject only to the paramount easement of navigation and to the power of regulating such easement possessed by the United States.
Okay, we know easement is a result of eminent domain. Easement is a result of eminent domain because the land was left in street, meaning that there was no heirs. So the government claimed to do eminent domain, i.e. the United States. But we know that the United States is successor to the crown and it's fixing nationality. But they only claimed it in fee and simple, as you just said here. Why? Because they separated church and state, as we read in the case we just read prior to this. Before it separated, this was all the Church of England. And this was church property because it represented the crown. Why? Because it was subject to the king's body of politics, with the king as his head and his officers. These officers were enrolled. And then they created an abstract story and replaced it. How we know that? Let's go to the main figure, William Wycliffe.
Point of interest, King.
Go ahead.
I'm still having a hard time understanding what does it mean? Absolute in the soil, covered by the waters.
This is their interpretation of the public trust doctrine. When you read the public trust doctrine under Martin versus Leslie of Waddell, the king held the land in trust, but it's based upon your knowledge of the king and how long you go back to the king, body politics, because there was different kings sitting in the king's body of politics under the crown. So when these heads of states or we see these judges ruling on their rulings based off the public trust document, doctrine, they dealing with it in fee and simple. And fee and simple is called feudal holdings. Feudal holdings were abolished because it went back to the king. When the monarchs under the British monarchs were holding land, they gave out abstract titles, which were fee and simple, because the crown can give abstract titles. They can't give allodial titles because that land was held intel. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yes.
So when they make a reference to absolute in the soil, that only concerns just soil, birthright. That was brought over by Calvin's case with King James. But it didn't involve just sanguineous, right, of blood. That's intel, is inherited by the blood, which is, if it's intel inherited, that's an intel estate. And we know that crown land is intel estate. And if it's crown land and it's intel estate, it's personified by the monarch. Personified is the abstract word incarnate. In contract law, it's called incorporate. So when you're done with the king's body of politics as a sole corporation, it's through incorporation. And the natural person incarnates into that role of the king by way of corporation. And then the body of politics comes alive by way of all those members who incorporate as the body of politics, as the aggregate aspect of it. But we're still natural people by one word, Parsons. Let's go ahead. But was you clear on that?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead before I go into the demise of the crown. If you look at 161-28 New Jersey Revised Statutes, they're called parsonage. Parsonage are buildings. Parsonage is what's being looked over by the king's trustees, which you are. Under 161-28, you have the power of a trustee to look over the church property, which is in the hands of corporations, i.e. these body of politics other than municipality and the state. They're not the corporation soul, because the corporation soul, it has its own body of politics, and it governs the crown for which those corporations exist in by way of charges granted by the state legislation. Because we know the state of all the states are not considered for diversity issues, because it's everybody who incorporate in the state which are considered for diversity, and we know all these are corporations. Make sense?
Follow.
Everybody understand?
Follow.
Any questions on that? All right, we're going through this. I'm expect y'all masters sitting up on this bench. So if I ain't got no question, I want y'all talking about this. I want to get a call next week. Such and such call me up asking about this. You getting the chance right now to get your clarity in it. So I need to know right now before we move on. All right. Parson is an ordained, for the lack of a better term, Christian person responsible for a small area, typically a parish. Parishes were under the control of what we call the diocese. The dioceses are under control of what we call the vicar, or what they call the apostolic prefect. We already discussed this in previous lessons. All this in the United States was established by John Carroll under the Roman Catholic Church as a result of the creation of the Protestant churches that grew out of the Church of England by way of the English Reformation under King Henry VIII from the House of Tudors. Everybody understand?
Follow.
I can't believe I just said that. Wow. Okay, let's go to the etymological meaning of the word parson. William Blackstone commentaries of the law of England says that a parson in a parish is a parish priest with the fullest legal rights of the parish properties. Read that, Brother Gray.
He's at work.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Read this, Brother Means.
Sure. A parson, persona ecclesiae, is one that has full possession of all the rights of a parochial church. He is called parson, persona, because by his person the church, which is an invisible body, is represented. And he is in himself a body corporate. In order to protect and defend the rights of the church, which he personates, by perpetual succession. He is sometimes called the rector or governor of the church, but the appellation of parson, however it may be depreciated by familiar, clownish, and indiscriminate use, is the most legal, most beneficial, and most honorable title that a parish priest can enjoy, because such one, Sir Edward Coke observes, and he only is said, Vicium si personam ecclesiae genera, to carry out the business of the church in person.
All right, so then go back to that word, personify, persona, incorporate, incarnate, the same word. He's talking about the body of politics is an invisible body. The body of politics is invisible. It only comes alive by way of that natural person filling the position to bring that invisible law back to life by way of its activation based off those people who operate in the body of politics, which are its members, its subjects, its lords, its commons, the council, and the body in parliament. And parliament makes legislations. Legislations become bills by way of vote, and then they become coded by way of statutory law. That makes sense to everybody.
Follow.
All right, so here we say, as again qualified by Master Edward Coke in regards to parsons, which means that a person has full possessory rights in regards to church property. Church property is an estate, an entail estate. If it's entail, then it's crown land, because the crown land is entail estate. Why? Because it's personified by the monarch. The monarch is the king. The king is head of the body of politics, which is invisible, it's immortal, it's perpetual, whatever term you choose to use. It makes sense to everybody.
Follow.
Okay. Demise of the crown. Read, Brother Meeks.
Yes, sir. Demise of the crown. Demise of the crown is a legal term in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms for the transfer of the crown upon the death of the monarch. The crown transfers automatically to the monarch's heir. The concept evolved in the Kingdom of England and was continued in Great Britain and then the United Kingdom. Let's see. The concept also became part of the constitutions of the British colonies and was continued in the realms, and it was continued in the Constitution of the Commonwealth realms until modified within those realms.
Stop right there. So let's let you know right there in regards to a body of politics, and the body of politics under the monarch is the corporation soul. But we know when it was dealing with the Commonwealth was not the corporation soul, because the corporation soul, as we read in that case dealing with Benjamin Wentworth, was in the crown, because the crown never granted, because they were not heirs. They were not heirs. Let's go back to that case right quick.
Central Railroad versus Jersey.
Town of Paulette versus Clark. It says, on the part of the plaintiff, it is contended that the share in question of the 6/8 part of the town of Paulette, which in the charter was granted or reserved for the glebe for the Church of England as by law. Let me read it from the case, because it's blocking it. Let me read exactly what it says. This is what it says in regards to that blocking it. It said, on the part of the plaintiff, it is contended that the share in question on the 6/8 part of the town of Paulette, which the charter was granted or reserved for a glebe for the Church of England as by law established, did not at the time of the grant pass from the king for want of a proper person to take, that it remained in the grantor until a revolution, when it passed over to the vested in the state of Vermont, who had therefore full right to dispose of it. By the words of the charter, the tract of land therein described is to be divided amongst those named in the charter. But these were based off legal fictions. these legal fictions were based off them being part of the corporation aggregate, but now the corporation sold. That's the reason why it still remained in the hands of a grantor until someone came in to fill that position in regards to that which was reserved and what they call the glebe. Now, what is the glebe? First, let's look at globe, because globe and glebe sound similar, don't it?
Yes.
The glebe is the land or the farmland of the church.
Yeah.
All right. Read that, Brother Means. This is globe.
Globe, late 14th. A large mass, middle 15th. Spherical solid body, a sphere, from Old French, globe, and directly from Latin globus, round mass, sphere, ball. Also of men, a throng, crowd, body mass, which is related to gleba, clod, lump of soil, and perhaps also to glomus, a ball of yarn.
Okay, this is what they talk about. King Edgar is holding what? Our crucifer globus.
And you see right there, it says see glebe.
See glebe.
See glebe. Now you go to glebe. This is what he was talking about in that case law you just read. Glebe, read what that says.
Sure. Glebe, now, late 14th. Soil of the earth, cultivated land, also a piece of land forming part of the clergyman's benefice. From Old French, glebe, from Latin gleba, clod, lump of earth, possibly from a pie, glem or glom, which might mean contain, embrace, or ball, or might be two different roots. Possible cognates include Old English clam, a tie fetter, Old High German klama, trap gorg, Old Irish glamour, gag, curb, and Latin globus, sphere, glebe, gleaba, clod, lump of earth, Old English shaipan, to the embrace, Lithuanian glibras, armful, glabdai, to embrace, support.
Okay, so as we can see, gleb and globe are synonymous because in all actuality, they talking about the soil. You're either talking about the soil or you're talking about the water. One of the two. Am I right?
Right.
You're either talking about land or water. So now we want to make sure, because we're talking about the Church of England, and we know that the Church of England is headed by the king. And king governs the land where the Church of England sits, which we said that, which was dissolved by the United States. By law, as established by law, not based off how they say it was done by Henry VIII from the House of Tudors, because it never said that he dissolved the Church of England, did it?
No.
It said he dissolved the monasteries. What are the monasteries? There was a bunch of monasteries, and the first monastery goes to what they call the School of Black Monks, called the Benedictine. That's what it was called, the School of Black Monks of the Benedictine Monastery. And this goes back to St. Dustin, because when Westminster Abbey was established, it was established by St. Dustin. We're going to get into that in a second if time permits. Okay. So we read Demise of the Crown. We read what globe is. The globe is synonymous with globe because it all make reference to the soil. It shows you the water, but you ain't standing on the water. You standing on the soil. Am I right?
Right.
Okay, we got to make sense of this. All right. Let's go back to what we discussed in the last class, going back to the Statutes of Restraint. And just get an idea. Now we're talking about the king. We're talking about the king's body of politics. We're talking about the body of politics is perpetual. We also read that the body of politics was not what were mentioned by masters, Catherine Cartide, Kantorowicz, Edmund Plowden, Edward Cope, as well as we're going to see it established by Henry VIII, because Henry VIII established the Ecclesiastical Appeals Act of 1532. And this was called the Appeals and Act of Restraint of Appeals, which was an act passed by the Parliament of England. It didn't say the Parliament of Scotland. It didn't say the Parliament of Great Britain. It didn't say the Parliament of the United Kingdom. It said the Parliament of England. And the Parliament of England goes back to Henry II. And Henry II, his son John, they established that in 1215. All right, now let's just go to the abstract of this act. Because remember, we're going back to the Church of England, which was reformation on the dissolution of the monastery by Henry VIII. And Henry VIII passed this act. And look at what it says. Read what it says, Brother Scott.
Extract. Whereby divers, sundry old authentic histories and chronicles. It is manifest.
Hold on. Before you read, I apologize. Let's just look at this guy again in that court case.
Okay.
Benjamin Winthorpe.
Benning.
Benning Winthorpe. This is a guy, governor of New Hampshire. Everybody look in the box. He was subject to monarch George II and George III, 1741, 1760. King George III, 1716, 1766. If you look at his profession, he was a merchant, colonial administrator. Everybody see that?
Mhm.
He was not a subject of England, nor was he a citizen of the United States. He was just a merchant. All right, let's go back to where was we at? Statute of Restraint. Go ahead.
Extract. Whereby divers, sundry old authentic histories and chronicles. It is manifestly declared and expressed that this realm of England is an empire, and so hath been accepted in the world, governed by one supreme head and king, having the dignity and royal estate of the imperial crown of the same, unto whom a body politic, compact of all sorts and degrees of people, divided in terms and by names of spirituality and temporality, be bounded and ought to bear next to God a natural and humble obedience. He being also institute and furnished by the goodness and sufferance of Almighty God with plenary, whole, and entire power, preeminence, authority, prerogative, and jurisdiction. The body spiritual, whereof having power when any cause of the law divine happen to come in question, and the laws temporal for trial of property of lands and goods, and for the conservation of the people of this realm in unity and peace, without rapine or spoil, was and yet is administered, adjudged, and executed by sundry judges and ministers of the other part of the said body politic, called the temporality. And both their authorities and jurisdictions do conjoin together in the due administration of justice, the one to help the other.
Stop. Okay, so we know the Church of England, which was dissolved in the United States, going back to Henry VIII through the dissolution of the monastery, was based off spiritualities and temporalities. We follow? They had their own different body of politics. These were the House of Commons, contrast to the House of Lords, who had their own body of politics, who were subject to the king. Because you had Parliament and you had the Council. The Council was the Lords and the Commons. Everybody follow?
Follow.
So here we hear in the 15th century by Henry VIII. Henry VIII was the one who Wycliffe, the one who wrote the Bible, influenced. John Wycliffe, what's his name? Let's get his name. Oh, we're getting to Wycliffe Bible. Y'all about to be amazed. Continue to read. Before you do, now remember, we're talking about the king's body of politics. We're talking about the king, and it mentions the people, conservative for the people, in regards to land, property, etc. And it said that not just in, it said in the empire, because it said England was the empire. So if it mentioned in the case law that United States destroyed the Church of England, and we know England is the empire, and we know that the dissolution of the monastery was not the Church of England, it was the monasteries, and we know monasteries are churches, then it was just talking about one church, it was talking about all the churches that were part of the empire of what we call England, and not just England over here, because England is the seat of, New Jersey is the seat of the empire. It's the seat of the empire, because when you go back to 46:3-2, it says King of England, or person, body of politics, corporate or corporate or person. So it lets you know that they just left out the crown. They just use another word to exchange it for the crown, because the crown is a seat or a tenure which the king sits as a natural body governing the body of politics, which is composed of the conservative people, which the laws have to protect, as well as those after they dissolve the crown, which are those judges and those ministers. Read what it says.
By his
It said, hold on one
assent.
second.
Okay.
Is that the first one or the second? Oh, yeah. All right, because it said judges and ministers. So all those judges and ministers, judges are in the courts and ministers are in the churches. All those under the temporality and spirituality have to come together in pursuit of justice in regards to the king's empire and concerning his subjects on his empire, i.e. crown land. Continue to read.
By his royal assent and by the assent of the Lords spiritual and temporal and the commons in this present parliament assembled, and by authority of the same, enact, establish, and ordain that all causes, testamentary causes of matrimony and divorces, rights of tithes, oblations and obventions already commenced, moved, depending, being, happening, or hereafter coming in contention, debate or question within this realm or within any the king dominions or marches of the same.
Stop. So it said within this realm or any of the king's dominion, which is all a part of what? The king's empire. So we just don't have an empire, we got dominions and realms. We're just in this realm because this realm is where our body politics assists us, as well as the other realm governed by their body politics, which is supposed to be based off the Church of England. What church? The English Church of England. Why? Because he just said it was an empire. Continue to read.
Or elsewhere, whether they concern the
king. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Right here.
Right here. Yeah, okay. Whether they concern the king, our sovereign lord, his heirs and successors, or any other subjects or residents within the same, of what degree sovereign they be, shall be from henceforth heard, examined, discussed clearly, finally, and definitively, adjudged and determined within the king's jurisdiction and authority, and not elsewhere. Any foreign inhibitions, appeals, censures, summons, citations, suspensions, interdictions, excommunications, restraints, judgments, or any other process or impediments of what natures, names, qualities, or conditions soever they be from the See of Rome or any other foreign courts, or what is that? Potentates of the world, or from and out of this realm, or any other king's dominion, or marches of the same to the See of Rome, or to any other foreign courts or potentates, to the let or impediment thereof in any wise notwithstanding.
Okay, so within that first and second paragraph, we established two types of body politics. The body politics of the king, which is an empire, and the body politics of those ministers and judges, which were only temporary because they were based on spirituality, abstract talk. And it said that when any other issues come in now, in the past, present, future, they ought to be dealt with at once and finally based off the king's realm, dominions, or empire. And it said that, and it said that in any court. So we just read a court case that said that, now these are the foreign courts. which clearly stated that the United States dissolved the Church of England. But here we read in legislation from Parliament from the Church of England that said we ain't got to listen to them. We ain't got to listen to y'all. We just proved that you took what we had the right to away from us. Now we got the right to take it back because according to what they say, nothing what you say counts. How we know that? Look what it says next. Continue to read. Actually, you can digress. And Brother Burgess. Take it back. Do your best. Can you see it?
Oh, you got him. You just Noble.
All right. And if it shall happen, any person or persons hereinafter to pursue or provoke any appeal contrary to the effect of this act, or refuse to obey, execute, and observe all things comprised within the same concerning the said appeals, prohibitions, and other foreign possessions to be sued out of this realm.
Processes.
And other foreign processes to be sued out of this realm for any of the causes as foresaid, that then even such person or persons or doing, refusing, or offending contrary to the true meaning of the act, their procedure,
Procurers.
Say it again.
Procurers.
Forters,
advocates,
counselors, and abettors, and every of them shall incur into the pain, forfeits, and say it one more time. Forfeitures and penalties ordained and provided in the said statute made in the said 16th year of King Richard II, and with like processes to be made against the said offenders, as in the same statute made in the said 16th year, more plainly appearance,
yes. So what they're saying is that any judge who does not listen to this act of Parliament, because remember, you're not in the body of politics under the city or the state or any foreign court. You're under the body of politics of the Kingdom of England, which supersedes any foreign court, because it just stated in this Parliamentary Act, and we know it's a Parliamentary Act of England because under 46:3-2, you're on England land. That statute says property, and the statute that says property, it mentions the King of England. So if it mentions the King in England in the same word or the same phrase, that means that you're on the King's land. And then right after it says the body of politics or any other person, corporate or whatever that last word is. I've forgotten the word. Body politics or other person, King of England, body politics or other person, corporate or whatever term it is. But what it's saying in that statute that you're on crown land. And if it's crown land, then you're only obligated to follow crown law, which is parliamentary law, because you're a subject of the law, which has a separate body of politics, which we just clarified it in that case dealing with Paulette. It said that what the king had and being the grantor was never given to the colonists, such as the merchant Benjamin Wentworth. It remained in the hands of the king. Why? Because it belonged to the crown. And the only way that it can be divvied out is if the king filled that position in regards to the authority governed by the body of politics, because you can't transfer it to anybody but to the estate that was left inheritance based off crown land. So the king don't even know it. It's for the benefit of the people. Let's go here. All right. So we know that, and we know that North America, when it was colonized, we go back to the Vikings, Eric Leifton. You go back to John Cabot. Everybody knows John Cabot was sent over here by who? Henry VIII.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's go into what we call the Catholic Church. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Let's go ahead. Catholic Church. Because we know Henry VIII, through the dissolution of the monastery, reformed the church to Protestant and not Roman Catholic. Am I right?
Correct.
Mhm.
Now, he called it the Church of England, but in his identity, he changed it from the Church of England, meaning he broke from the Church of England and became a Protestant, which is really a Roman Catholic. They're one and the same. But that's based off theology and belief. But based on what we read in case law, it said that the United States dissolved the monasteries, which were the churches of England. Legally, lawfully, once and for all, the United States did that, and Henry VIII was nowhere around, was he, y'all?
No.
Nowhere around. So somebody lying. Somebody got to be lying. Because we know that George Washington and King George III were actually ruling at the same time.
Correct.
At the same time. Now let's get to this, because when we get into the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church is the Roman Catholic Church where Henry VIII broke away from. Let's go back to the origin. We're gonna jump and skip. History, I mean. The Christian religion is based on the reported teachings of Jesus, who lived and preached in 1st century AD in the province of Judea and the Roman Empire under Catholic theology. But under law, we know that based off the king's two bodies and what Catherine Colcott said about the king's two bodies in reference to King Edward the Peaceful, who lived in 950, within the Berber year is 950, and the Gregorian year is 1st century AD, which is not based off history. It's based off a theosophical belief. Remember, legality, where's the legality in your theology? We don't see no legality in the theology of what we call Jesus, because Jesus didn't exist in 1 AD, because in the Gregorian year, 1 AD didn't come into the year 1582 with the Gregorian calendar by Pope Gregory XIII. And we also know the Church of England, which was, as they said in case law, was dissolved in the United States, goes back to Augustine of Canterbury in the 1st century, who under the authority of Pope Gregory I had all the Anglo-Saxon tribes converted to Christianity, where the Roman Catholic teachings come from. Does that make sense to everyone? I couldn't have said it more clear. The Catholic Church history goes back to the 1st century, where it deals with the Christianity, and we know 1st century in our year is 950 AD, or 950 BC and 951 AD, at the time where King Edward is king. He's king. But we know that Christianity under the Roman Catholic Church was established by Augustine of Canterbury through Pope Gregory I, through the Reformation, through the Gregorian Mission, of having all these Berber Anglo-Saxon descendants convert to Christianity under the Roman Catholic teachings, were descended from the Pope, and goes back to what we call the East and West Schism in 1054 under William the Conqueror. That's where Rome's story starts, with William the Conqueror. Everybody understand? Any questions? I know I gotta have a question on that part. So everybody understand the difference between Rome, Christianity, and the Anglo-Saxon history going back to the original church, going back to King Edward the Peaceful. And that was the first monastery established. That makes sense. All right, move forward. Let's go back to Wycliffe.
Are you saying something, Brother Scott?
Yeah, I'm still confused about how do we use a calendar to
The calendar. We know 1 AD, 1 BC, and 1 AD, and the Gregorian year. We know that didn't exist because the Gregorian calendar was created in the year 1582. So there can never be a 1 AD, 1 BC, and 1 AD. If there is a 1 BC and 1 AD, and the calendar didn't come out till 1582, that means that whoever created that calendar, meaning Pope Gregory XIII, backdated it for 1 BC to 1 AD.
Okay, that's what
that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
You clear?
I'm clear, because I thought that the Roman Empire couldn't be validated without a calendar. So that's, I just needed that clarification.
Yeah, they don't have no calendar. The only calendar they have to vote their story, the Egyptian story, the Greek story. They need Pope Gregory the 13th to do that. And he was not around then.
Understood.
So if he was not around and the only calendar in existence at that time was the Berber calendar, then guess who existed? The Berbers. Because prior to 1582, the only calendar that exists at that time was the Berber calendar. I don't know about nobody else's nationality. We Berbers. If I was a Greek, I had to use the Greek calendar. If I was a Roman, I use the Roman calendar. If I was a Japanese, I have to use their calendar, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. Because everybody today got their own different calendar. And though none of them predate the Berber calendar. Because the Berber calendar goes all the way back to Psamtik III, and Psamtik III ruled in the 6th, 7th century BC, and that goes back to Psamtik III, who was descended from who? Shoshing, what you read in the Bible, the one we're about to read right now. Shoshing in the Bible was called the Libyan Berber in the 942. King Edgar was born in 943 AD. Now, every 1,000 years, they say the spirit of our ancestors incarnate. So it's mighty strange that when you get the biblical story that was created from Pope Gregory the 13th in 1582, to backdate the story, what we call the Egyptian, which is a Greek name, and mind you, they spell it in English. So if the Greeks don't speak English, they got their own language. So if you're interpreting Greek in the language of English, then that means that you first must start with English to identify the mishaps and the prolonged myth stories going back to the Egyptians. Because when you go back to the Egyptian story starts with the Greeks. And we know the Greek story was preceded by the Persians. And we know the Persian story was preceded by who? Those Berbers, going back to Shoshing. And Shoshing is mentioned in the Book of Kings. And he's mentioned in the Book of Kings who sacked Solomon's temple. The first, the second temple. You only got one temple left. This is our temple, the English Third Temple Church of England. Why? Because we know the Jews were expelled in England in 1290. Not in the Bible, because they never existed. Because if they did, you need a calendar, and no calendar don't come on the scene till 1582. Pope Gregory the 13th, who descended from Pope Gregory the First, who had all the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, which you see on this Dawn channel today, converted to Christianity, which is the abstract story. Those are the temporal stories. Those are the spiritual stories. But when it comes to the legality on based off theology, you must go back to the law. Okay, now let's go back to the abstract law, where they descended down from. Because we're going to see the first Bible was who? Wycliffe Bible. You can read, brother. Continue to read, brother Burgess.
Wycliffe Bible. Wycliffe Bible is the name now given to the group of Bible translations in Middle English that were made under the direction of John Wycliffe. They appeared over the period of approximately 1382 to 1395. These Bibles translations were the chief inspirations of chief cause of the Lodered movement, a pre-Reformation movement that reject many of the distinctive teachings of the Roman Catholic Church.
Stop. Okay. 1382 to 1395. You see another set of religious society breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church. First, it was the Protestants in the 15th century. Then you had the Lolos in the 13th century breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church. What up with this Roman Catholic Church if everybody breaking away from it? It must not be the right thing. No disrespect to the faith. We're dealing with a legal aspect, not theology. It's about law for us, all right? So it says the Lodered movement, a pre-Reformation. So you had the English Reformation, then you had the pre-Reformation from the Lollards run by John Clef. And we know John Clef, what he's responsible for? Let's get an intake.
Point of interest, King.
Go ahead, Sister Alan.
What you just scrolled past over in the ledger, It said John 3:16. Are they talking about this John?
No,
Or are they talking about
no,
the
they're talking
context?
about John, from the scripture, the biblical John.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they're talking about. That's, remember, we're dealing with Wycliffe Bible.
Okay.
And Wycliffe Bible, he was the head of the Lothar Reformation, which broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. Because we know the Roman Catholic Church was the one responsible for the Christian faith in the first century. But that never existed because in the first century, it's actually 950 with King Edward the Peaceful. And we know they couldn't exist because the Church of England under Augustine of Canterbury, under Pope Gregory I, where the Christian religion comes from, had all the Anglo-Saxon, us converted to Christianity, which is why all our ancestors adopt Christianity from the Bible, which was created by who? Wycliffe, through his society. And let's look at the Lothar Society. Go ahead and read, Brother Burgess. Did I answer your question, Sister Allen?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
Lottery, as you said, Lottery, also known as Lordism, or the Lothar movement, was a Protestant Christian religion movement that exists from the mid-14th century into the 16th century English Reformation. It was initially led, excuse me. It was initially led by John Wycliffe, a Roman Catholic theologian who was dismissed from the University of Oxford in 1381 for criticism of the Roman Catholic Church. The Lothars' demand was primarily for a reform of Western Christianity. They formulated their belief in the 12 conclusions of the Lothars.
Stop right there. Okay. So it says that it was a branch of the Roman Catholic Church who broke away from the Roman Catholic Church as well. All right. And it said that because of his tactics or his ways, he was for criticism from the Roman Catholic Church, he was dismissed from the University of Oxford. Now, this is very strange, Oxford University, because the picture of King Edward the Peaceful, which you see every time we open up, it's on the University of Oxford. All right, University of Oxford. Let's go down. These are all the universities. First one, All Souls College. This is where King Edward the Peaceful's pictures on. All Souls College. And these are all the colleges. You get time, look them up. But this is where King Edward the Peaceful's picture that is on All Souls College. And at that time, in first century, he was Jesus Christ. But due to all the reformation, all the history was created and became abstract, which is why they created the Bible under the auspices of John Wycliffe, and all this was done in what we call the Westminster Assembly. If you made it to Thursday's class, we spoke about that. Westminster Assembly is in what they call Westminster Abbey. Is actually a part of it, and they have what they call Jerusalem Chamber. Jerusalem Chamber is where it's named after Henry VIII, where the Bible was compiled in 1611. We spoke about that, but for the sake of time, let's move forward. All right, so we see John Wycliffe, ahead of the Lothar Society, was a pre-Protestant who also broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. All right. Wycliffe. This is the family crest of the name Wycliffe. Wycliffe. History, family crest, and coat of arms. The surname Wycliffe is an English habitational name deriving from Wycliffe, a village on the south banks of the River Tees. Originally, the village was located in the North Riding, Yorkshire, but was transferred to the county of Durham in 1974. The name was probably derived from Old English word wit, which means bend or cliff, meaning slope. Another reference claims that the name was derived from the word, the White Cliffs, and that ever heard of White Cliffs of Dover. And this may be true as they were white gray cliffs nearby. As you can see here, you see the Jerusalem cross here on the name Wycliffe. Now we know Godfrey's fifth count of Anjou father name was Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. But before we go there, let's go back here. Loader.
Let's see about the coin.
Well, anyhow, when you look at this time, let me see if I can find it first of all. One point I'm going to get to. All right. The association between Wycliffe, I know where I was. Came to my mind. Thank you. All right, let's see. Version. There are two distinct versions of Wycliffe Bibles that have been written. The early was translated during the life of Wycliffe, while the later version was regarded as the work of John Purvey. Since the printing press was not invented, it was called the Gregorian press, if those who are wondering. The early Bible is rigid and literal translation of Latin Vulgate Bible, and Wycliffe's view of theology is closer to the realism than to spiritualism. Let me go to where I want to go to. John Wycliffe, that's where it's at. All right, Wycliffe is now named, Wycliffe Bible is named, now given to a group of Bible translations into Middle English that were made under the direction of John Wycliffe. They appeared over a period from approximately 1382 and 1395. This is the time when will be called the 100-Year War, the 100-Year War, the War of the Roses. This is the time when the Edward I and his heirs are fighting. Let's prove it.
It wasn't in circulation for that long. It was only from 1382 to 1395.
Mm-hmm. Y'all bear with me for a second. I just seen Henry IV, didn't it? I just seen Henry IV somewhere. It's up here. Okay, here we go. Catholic Church, England. The association between Wycliffe Bible and Legality calls Kingdom of England. The association between Wycliffe's Bible and Legality calls the Kingdom of England and the established Catholic Church in England to undertake drastic campaign to suppress it. In early years of the 15th century, Henry IV and his status de Heretio, forgive me, Camberindo, Archbishop Thomas of Arundel, and Henry night to public criticism and enacted some of the several religious censorship laws in Europe at the time. Henry IV. Henry IV, son of John Gaunt, if I'm not mistaken. Father, John Gaunt. John Gaunt is the son of Edward III. So as we can see, all this is taking place at the time of the War of the Roses, the First 100-Year War, and the Second 100-Year War. All this religious contradiction, all this religious creation, all the religious theosophical points of view that the people, believers believe in, all originated at the time of Edward III, through what we call the War of the Roses, because Henry VIII took control of the Church of England as based off a theosophical point of view, as read through history. When we just read in case law that it wasn't Henry VIII, it was the United States. Because we know prior to New Jersey under George Cordebrett and John Berkeley surrendered to the crown in 1702. They got grants from Charles II, who got grants from Charles I when he gave it to Edmund Plowden. Before George Cordebrett and George Berkeley had the charters to New Jersey, Edmund Plowden had it, and it's called the Albion Colony. And now we know that Edmund Plowden, Father Edmund Plowden, had the history on the king's two bodies. So all these people are aware of the king's two bodies, and it's mentioned in the present day statute 46:3-2, which brings me to this point. Jerusalem cross. Because we see on Edmund's Plowden with what's his name, Wycliffe family crest, you see the same symbol.
And point of interest.
Go ahead, Archbishop.
And it was mighty peculiar that Wycliffe name meant White Cliffs, which is the same name that they gave to Albion. It was supposed to be representation of White Cliffs.
White Cliff. And you see the movie Black Panther, when you see them traveling back, she said, "We're almost home, King." And you see the White Cliffs of Dover when they travel back to England. The same thing you see in the movie Coming to America. They own British Airways. British Airways are not, if you live in Africa, why you got a British Airway jet flying to North America, to New York? That don't make no sense. Don't make no sense when British Airways should be in Europe. Europe, Africa are in two different continents. All right, but we know, according to case law, they're all one empire. All one empire. That's the only way you'll see a British empire, if it's one empire, which must be the case. All right. So going back to John Wycliffe, the ones who was responsible for the creation, for the filtering, and the translation of the so-called theosophical references that majority of those who practice the abstract faith adopt. And we know when they were adopted in the physical church, because the Roman Catholic Church is not an abstract church, is it? You can go right down to Rome and run right into the Pope. That's not abstract. So if they got an abstract in regards to that which was in England, then there must be a concrete in England as well. We just don't know about it. Why? Because it was dissolved in the United States. Why? Because that concrete church here in the United States was the concrete church until we replaced it with the abstract church, with those who wrote that Bible, such as what we call John Wycliffe. Why? Because John Wycliffe wears the symbol of Jerusalem in his family crest. That means that the name Jerusalem must go back to the particular area called Jerusalem. And you know, Jerusalem means what? The city of peace. That's what it means, the city of peace. So when you deal with Jerusalem and you deal with Godfrey, the fifth Caliban Jew, his father was who? Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. They were ruler of France. All that was what we call the kingdom of Albion and the kingdom of Iberia. And the kingdom of Iberia, when it was invaded by Rome in 117 AD, which is in the year 1054, with William the Conqueror, it just encompasses Great Britain. It encompasses North America. It encompasses Iberia, which is Spain, France, Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, Kush, all that territory dealing with the ancient Kush, and went all the way up to what we call Canaan land. It went all the way up to the Black Sea, and when the territory was actually taken over by the Roman Catholic Empire, such as the Roman Catholic Church, which dealt with, as we know through history, was created through St. Augustine under the authority of Pope Gregory I, through the reformation of the English Church of England to the Church of England as established by Pope Augustine of Canterbury, which can't prove he even existed, because the calendar to prove he existed didn't come out to 1582. So I mean, all the stories predating in reference to those calendars, we can throw out the window because we can't validate them. So if we can't validate them, that means that we put ourselves in those stories, and we can validate those stories. Why? Because we go back to those kings and queens of England, which has our name, has our symbols, has our sign, has our storyline and our timeline, as well as the laws to support it. How we know that? Let's go back to that penny. Now we know King George III had a penny, right? And we know that King Edgar the Peaceful had a penny. And if the penny goes back to the monarchs, whoever the monarch was, that penny must have had some weight. Now we're going to take it back to Godfrey's Fifth Count of Anjou with their penny. Let's go there. And this would be my closing remarks. Follow the money, y'all. We're talking about Jerusalem, the symbol. Archbishop, you can close out on this.
Origins. While the symbol of the fivefold cross appears to originate in the 11th century, its association with the Kingdom of Jerusalem dates to the second half of the 13th century. The symbolism of the fivefold cross is variously given as the five wounds of Christ, Christ in the four evangelists, or Christ in the four quarters of the world. The symbolism of five crosses representing the five wounds is first recorded in the context of the consecration of the same Prelate's church under the patronage of Robert of Normandy before 1035.
Stop. Ooh, Robert of Normandy. Let's see who that is. Duke of Normandy. Oh, I thought that was Robert the First. Robert the First. Is this Robert the Devil? If I'm not mistaken. I think this is Robert the Devil, if I'm not mistaken. But he related to William the Conqueror, because you see William the Conqueror right here. So he related. All right, let's go back.
Says the crosses are incised in the church's altar stone. The cross and crosslets, or tilby pennies, minted under Henry II of England during 1158 to 1180, have the Jerusalem cross on the obverse, with the four crosslets depicted as ducassate, or diagonal, Similar cross designs on the obverse of the coins go back to at least the Anglo-Saxon period. As the arms of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the design is traditionally attributed to Godfrey of Bouillon himself. It was not used, however, by the Christian rulers of Jerusalem during the 12th century.
Ah, okay. Tilby penny. This is part of English penny. All right, start from here. King Henry.
King Henry II ascended the throne in 1154 as the first of the Plantagenet dynasty. For the first few years of his reign, the coins of King Stephen continued to be produced, but in order to restore public confidence in the currency, a new standard was introduced, known as the Tilby penny. After a hoard of such coins, which was found at Tilby, Lincolnshire in 1807, the Tilby hoard, a total of 30 minutes.
Stop right there. Okay. So we see the Tilby penny in Lincolnshire in 1807. Now, guess when Abraham Lincoln was born? 1809. He was born in 1809, but yet we had a penny out there, and his last name is Lincoln. Guess where Lincoln come from? Lincolnshire. So there you see it, y'all. They're just living off our history. And our history goes back to the money, and the money is in Jerusalem. Because we know the birthright is in the Father. And we know that based off the Agadic succession break between him and the second marriage to Eleanor Aquitaine, he said that the Agadic succession will go back to Godfrey. And Godfrey is the son of Folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. Because we know that when it said Godfrey of Bouillon, he said, I'm not going to use that title because that title is reserved for Christ. And that title, Christ, is reserved for the anointed one. And that anointed one is me. So therefore, I'm showing you where the money at. That money is in that penny created by our ancestors going all the way back to Jesus Christ, which was King Edgar the Peaceful, who had the first penny. And with that, I digress with this beautiful lesson. All right?
That was beautiful.
Queen, you got the first remarks.
Wow, I'm impressed. Another beautiful lesson. Going back to the king's two bodies, body of politics, the new Minster Charter, which I didn't know about till today, and the manuscript. We talked about the king, again, natural born subjects versus the United States being natural born citizens, and the dissolution of the Church of England, Parsons, demise of the crown, Globe and Glebe, Benny Whitworth, extract, Wycliffe's Bible, and the penny, which is also another coinage. We've been talking a lot about coins lately, which is very interesting. And I know like today they focus on, they have that big Bitcoin, but if they, I don't know what the significance really is of Bitcoin to this, but it is dealing with a lot of the different coins. But it's just very interesting to talk about all the coins, which I had no idea about until today, which is very significant. With that, I digress.
Well said, well said. So much was said today, and there's so much to focus on, but I mean, that was being said today. It's hard to focus on any one thing that was said because it's all impertinent. But one thing I want to point out when she talks about the dissolution of the monastery or the dissolution of the Church of England, that's where all the money at, because, everything that glitters ain't gold. And we know she just mentioned Bitcoin. And we just read in that case law from the last previous class that, you can't coin money. So even if you got money that's coined, you can't coin money other than the money that already existed. And that's the money of our ancestors. So we're just plain rich, and we have to just return to that standard. And that standard will bring peace. We know peace is Jerusalem, and that will bring peace in the city, which was the city that was established by our ancestors. So well said, Queen. Archbishop?
Once again, beautiful lesson, King. One thing that I wanted to dive in a little bit further into that, to the, the demise of the crown, because I think it's very important that the brothers and sisters understand that, you as king, that they must come back and pledge their allegiance to the king for them to even be able to reconnect themselves with the money, as well reconnect themselves back to Parliament. We can go down to the part where it says, was it United States, if I'm not mistaken? I don't know if it says English or is it English, or it's going down.
Origin?
Nope. Oh, well, we can, you want to read this part?
Yeah, read that.
And then go to the next part with it. So just go ahead and read this. So in English origin, like they said, like the king says, we are Englishmen, English women. So make sure you're dealing with English origins or when it comes down to this information. So it says the term demise was originally a law French term used for the transfer of real property, whether by lease or sale. Blackstone notes that this is a term for the transfer of property, then became used in the death of the monarch to mean the kingdom is transferred or a demise to his successor. Now we know the so-called United States try to claim to be successor because there's no king. All right, well, demise in this sense is not referring to the monarch's death, but to the automatic transfer of the monarchy to the heir by operation of law.
Yes, birthright, y'all.
Birthright. So to pay attention to this, it says the third attribute of the king's majesty is his perpetuity. Once again, the king never dies. The law ascribes to him his political capacity and absolute immortality. The king never dies. Henry, Edward, or George may die, but the king survives them all. For immediately upon the decease of the reigning prince in his natural capacity, his kingship or imperial dignity by act of law, without any interregnum, that means pause or break, or interval, is vested at once in his heir, who is eo instantanti, king to all intents and purposes.
Yes.
All right,
Parson, y'all. That says parson, just like parson.
Exactly. So the point for this part is that the king had to be all intents and purposes. And on top of that, the king never dies. So even though the so-called 1776 declaration, all of that jazz, none of that stuff denotes or removes or negates the king heirs who's going to come after those so-called breakages. Why? Because we still have charters, and those charters are still have to be enforced by those trustees who are supposed to be doing what? Have their allegiance back to the king whose status never dies. So therefore, those trustees always must exist. And like it showed, most of these trustees, based off of the term Parsons, are invisible until they come visible. So let's go to the point where it says about the historical effects of the demise of the crown, and then we can go and go to the rest of the ending, because this is very, very important, especially for you who are watching this. I'll go back up, King, you were right. Right here, dissolution of parliament. So it says the historical effects of the demise of the crown are the result of the personal nature of the monarch as head of the government in the medieval period. The legislative, executive, and judicial functions of government all flow from the monarch's personal authority. Once again, it's coming from the king's authority.
Corporation soul.
Corporation soul. The monarch's death, therefore, affected all aspects of the monarchical government. So if something happened to the king, everything, pretty much is just
shut down.
It's shut down. Pay attention to this. And now we know what happened.
Hold on, before you go, think about the court case, the dissolution of the Church of England. The body politics is what we call parliament.
Now remember what happened in 1707, the Acts of Union. And what did the Acts of Union do?
Extinguish the Parliament of England.
Now we're going to see why. So dissolution of parliament, a demise resulted in the immediate dissolution of parliament. Parliaments were summoned at the will of the king and dissolved by the king at his personal decision. Upon the death of the king's parliament dissolved. It was up to the next king to decide whether to call a parliament and when it would be called. Now in the 1707, the first monarch or British monarch was who? Queen Anne. So as you see, there was no English parliament after 1707 because there was no English king.
Yeah, she was a British monarch.
So now let's read this. It says offices became vacant. So this is all those brothers and sisters who say they have an estate, title, etc. going back to England. You don't have that any longer. And I'm gonna tell you why. It says all crown offices appointed by the monarch immediately became vacant upon the demise of the crown. The principle applied to the great officers of the state, such as the Lord Chancellor, the Lord High Treasurer, and the Earl Marshal, and the Lord High Admiral. All of these officials held their positions by virtue of the personal appointment by the monarch and became vacant on the death of the monarch. Lesser royal offices also became vacant upon the demise. As all royal servants were appointed by and served the monarch, that service will end upon the death of the monarch. So what they're saying, if you worked for the king or had a title by the king before the demise, or once the demise took place, you no longer had that title. It became vacant. The cumbersome effect of the entire royal service losing office was mitigated by a practice which evolved by lesser royal officials being continued in office, provided they swore allegiance to the new monarch. So this would be new trustees.
Yes, sir.
However, this practice did not initially apply to the great officers of state who were the core of the monarch's government. The new monarch selected his own great officers.
There you go. That's a writ of summons.
There you go.
Yes.
And so what this is saying is now that the King of England has returned, the king picks all of his people for those office or those official positions. And everyone who wants to actually become part of the kingdom return or resurrected, you got to pledge your allegiance back to the king. It's not because you so-called was born with your English ancestry. That's just the key to get in the door. But the door only going to be open if you pledge your allegiance to come back.
Well said, Archbishop. Well said. All right. CA.
Hello. Well said, Archbishop. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear you,
sir.
Noble.
Well said. Yes. Going over it once again, a marvelous lesson. Looking forward to that time where we can all break bread in the upper chamber, of Parliament like we're supposed to. But with all that was studied and read, especially in the lesson, the true body of politics, the corporate soul, the station, the king as his consciousness, and the station being occupied by our King Clifford Jefferson and the Queen Godwinson. That is in perpetuity. You see, the return of the king and the jubilee is more than just the notion of jurisdiction and right, but it restored the right through the consciousness. So for that, we give high honors to you, King. Give high honors to you, Queen. Give high honors to you, Archbishop, Esquire, all of the nobles and councils, and I on the sense that this is a continued study of overstanding and understanding the birthright that is entitled and in the allegiance in the birthright of citizenship. We've gone over it.
Frozen, Noble.
That the heirs are coming back into successorship, which is the ownership and operation of the business functions and or the estate functions that were vacant. The station and the political status that was vacant has been restored. With that, I yield the floor. I love you all. I look forward to the next marvelous lesson and the communion with the council in the King's Bench here at the Third Temple English Church, the House of Murphy. We love you. Thank you again.
Well said, Brother Murphy,
Well said,
from the House
Brother
of
Murphy.
Murphy. We appreciate you,
Murphy.
CA. Brother Burgess from the House of Burgess.
Greetings, family.
Excuse me.
The more I download your conscience, King, I'm understanding the position that I'm taking and how my allegiance gets protection from the crown and what I have to do, this great work that I have to do. I won't swindle the inheritance. I will do what's necessary. So I understand there's nothing that they can give me that will protect me or denotes to my birthright or my nationality.
Well said. Well said. We love when you be able to say a lot in small words, and that you have done. So well said, Noble. Countess Militant.
Yes, King. There's a lot in this lesson that's really got the wheels turning. Certainly John Wycliffe and the Lollard movement and the first chance to, in other words, come up against the Roman Catholic Church, which I think is really bogus. That was some sort of monarch move. I don't know all the back history, but as I'm listening and pulling some things together, I know that John Wycliffe, the whole fight, along with Martin Luther, again going up against the corruption of the church, that people were living in extreme lapse of luxury, and even the pious was living in poverty, trying to help the people. And I'm just intrigued by the church, as well as I want to research the Geneva Bible. So this opens up a lot of doors, and I just appreciate you bringing this up into our consciousness. Thank you.
You're welcome,
What's
Sister
that, Lady
Middleton.
Middleton?
Yeah, that's my job, to brings everybody's perspective to the table and then give you ability to be able to decipher what you feel is truth or falsehood, because only one will measure up, and that's the truth. Truth don't need no cosigner. It don't need one. When you need a cosigner, then it ain't the truth. You know what I'm saying? It's not the truth. So well said, Sister Militant. Countess Walker from the House of Walker.
Greetings.
Greetings.
I was so looking forward to this lesson. Countess Allen and we were talking yesterday about this lesson. And, you know, most of us was raised in the church, and we actually had no idea, you know, what we were saying, what we were reading. And it wasn't until I learned about this the statute in restraint of appeals. I mean, that got me so excited. That, you know, every week when I went to church, we used to say that the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When I think about this statute in restraint of appeals, I think about the Lord's Prayer. And we have been dealing with the presumption of law. And, you know, and we have all this case law and all these statutes and all these things that Parliament has put in place, which was the body, the legislature for the king, if you will, was Parliament. And we, you know, all of us have also thought, you know, that the Republic still stands, and, you know, we've left our seats vacant of government. We left our Parliament vacant. That's what we have left vacant, our Parliament. And all this presumption of law, every time we go into these courts, in this private law, that in legal system and processes, you know, administrative, that's a process, that's not law.
Yes. Seizure.
Yeah, and we have the statute in restraint of appeals that says all of that is void, has been void, and will forever be void, because that's what our Parliament has put in place. So thank you, King. Thank you, Queen. Thank you, Archbishop. And thank you, Esquire Burgess, who I sometimes get to bounce law off with. Thank you for that law. And, you know, the Lord's Prayer is not abstract to me anymore. It's very.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you're supposed to interpret the Lord's Prayer. Yes, sir. You call him, hear you, because he's here with you, never left you. Well said. Countess Allen from House of Allen.
Greetings.
Greetings.
This was once again a marvelous lesson. I promise I won't cry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I just want to say that under the Third Temple English Church, you have many freedoms, specifically for women. And I stress that because under the Roman Catholic Church, there is many restrictions. We fought against all of these restrictions throughout history, and this is what is culminating into today. The act of restraint means to hold and to prevent. And we are appealing to the restraint of the Roman Catholic Church, and thereby we no longer want to subscribe in light of what we know, in light of what we hold dear and true, and what we have learned, and what the King and the Third Temple English Church has brought to us. I subscribe to police brutality. We don't want to subscribe to tickets, search and seizure of our property, high taxes, brutality of all kinds that we are plainly aware of and that we see today. All of that is because of the body politic of the Roman Catholic Church. In order to come back into the light and the knowledge, we must know the difference between the two. I took your advice and I really, really studied this, King. And it must be known and it must be made true that this is this is the true knowledge. This is an adventure beyond itself. You know, we must dive into this and the greatest possibility that we, I mean, I went back and I watched Me and Venus yesterday. We went back and we watched The Sandman. And the way we broke down each and every episode, I mean, it was like the king was speaking through all of these episodes. We were able to actually go in and pull out all the things that they were talking about, what hell actually is, you know, the exchequer, you know, and it was like the Lucifer's right-hand man was Imazakeen, Amazon. That was the Lucifer's right-hand man.
Yes.
So, you know, and I was like, wow, it's just everything, the veil is completely lifted now, you know. Hey, baby girl. So, you know, we have no more excuses. And all I can say is just, you know, let's just keep hammering at this, keep studying, and just keep bringing it back to the people until this panel fills up. Thank you. I digress.
Well said, Sister Allen from the House of Allen, as well as Sister Walker from the House of Walker, Camelback, and also Sister Militant from the House of Militant. Well said from our counselors. It's good to hear that in the spirit of the Queen. You know, she speaks so highly of y'all, and I expect great involvement from y'all on her tutorship. So well said. Brother Mean from the House of Mean.
I'm almost speechless. It was very ingenious to come back off of everyone else's comments and remarks of how you were able to clarify our subjectivity to a de facto government, being that they assumed our positions null and void, and then recreate themselves a separate government and then claim us as their own, where we're able to see that we have an established government and a society of our church, which protects us all through the corporate soul that is governed through the crown. But without the king's head, the body would be dead. And as we can see, for many centuries, we have been dead because we had not the right mind. And from your lessons here, connecting back to the head being as one, abstractly, the United States claiming to be who we actually are, when you pull back that veil and able to see it physically manifest in our lives created today through these lessons, it was remarkably illustrated once again. I think you've outdone yourself once again here, King. It's a clear view for us to be able to see and accept this in these lessons, especially these court cases and statutes that establish us as we reestablish and incorporated through the Third Temple English Church of England. I feel even more confident in listening and learning these lessons, even as we go back through the previous ones. They all are in conjunction with one another. That's for our future and betterment of our estate, to be able to be trustees and manage ourselves appropriately in society where they can see the true meaning of heaven on earth. As we go over these lessons and we call out our names of our ancestors in the readings, in the documents, even in the pictures, people look at it as a, I guess it says of imagination, but when they call on their ancestors, we're calling on actual ancestors, and we're bringing back their consciousness through you and to us, so we can be complete as one. And then we move together and operate and function in a body of a whole polity. There's nothing more powerful to see the lies that they created and unfold ourselves as the true English heirs. Again, I say thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Well said, noble man.
That's the mysticism. That's what they call the mysticism of Christ.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? We are the living witnesses of that mysticism. We are the mysticism. We are that secret. So well said. Brother Walter from the House of Walter, greetings, noble.
Greetings, everyone. Boy, that was powerful. I wasn't able to get it all, so I'm gonna have to go back and review the video. But I just appreciate the perseverance that everything was preserved. And you go back, King and Queen, you go back and you bring out information that was brought out. I mean, this lady, Catherine Carvalho, that was some really deep information that was preserved for us to be able to collect once again, to be able to use to get back what belongs to us.
Yes.
Even though they call themselves holding it as trustees, they actually took it.
Yes.
So here we are now, we're coming back together as a family. I mean, I don't know anything better than this family right here. I mean, I got biological family, and I tell them all the time, you know, and I tell my wife, man, this is something I've never ever thought that would happen. But I've always held a high chord for knowing that there was someone called Jesus and someone that was there to look after the people. And so here you are, you're actually looking after not just us, but the people who watch this in the public. They're going to see all of the information that you brought forth. And some of those ones, they won't be able to grasp now, but later on, they're going to remember this. Because I remember one of the sisters said she had been listening to this for years. And finally, you know, she's here. So for me, this is new for me. A sister invited me, Sister Countess Walker invited me here.
Yes.
And I've held from day one when she first told me about the Time Immemorial. You know, I was like, what the hell is Time Immemorial? You know what I'm saying? So I never even understood it until I started being a part of the meetings. And now nobody can't pull me away from it. So I just appreciate everybody who's here and information that's being brought out. King and Queen, both archbishops, Brother Burgess, the Esquire, Brother Means. I mean, all of the information that you guys bring out, it's to be preserved for others that will be able to see and listen to and bring out to ones that they love as well. And with that, I'm impressed.
Well said, Brother Warthor. Once again, that's the language of the body of
Well said,
politics.
Noble.
We all talk the same, we all move the same, and get the same results. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Brother Gray, if you can, if you allow, time allows you, you want to say a couple of words, or you're going to pass?
Yes, King. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Once again, another great lesson. It just keeps getting better and better. And everybody on the panel is growing and growing and just sounds so eloquent. I really want to know about how we kind of lost everything. And this lesson really, really hit the nail on the head on this with the demise of the crown and the dissolution of the parliament and how the offices are still vacant. And all we got to do is filter.
Phil, there you go.
Yep.
And it was bringing me back because I don't know if you guys know this, but I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness as a kid. So that's one of the toughest things to come out of. You really lose your family. You lose all your friends because everybody you ever grew up with was in that organization. Well, it brought me back to the last lesson on it was talking about the Job having to be brought back to less than penniless, right? And then me and Brother Means was reading it, and it hit me like a ton of bricks that, oh my God, the king is Job, the body politic is Job, I'm Job, everybody here is Job. And what I mean by that, all of us had such a long journey to get here and thought and lost so much that we thought we lost. But just like Job, England had to be kind of, I guess, somewhat sacrificed for the greater good.
Go ahead, boy. Go ahead.
So what it was happening was, it's just like Satan said, because he had all these things, that if you just take them away, he will never, mention your name again. And basically that's what happened to England. It was great, had a huge realm, but we had to go, this had to happen. We had to fall into outer existence. But through it all, we held faithfully. when I came back, I even moved over to Africa for a while. When I came back, I put up all my books, all my stuff that I was learning. I said, this stuff has brought me nothing but pain. And I put it in the box, but I couldn't put it down. And so now I understand that what I thought I lost through the Third English Temple, I have gained tenfold, unimaginable wealth, and not just wealth that anybody else talks about, cars and stuff, but wealth of knowledge. So I want to thank you, King, Queen, Archbishop, CA, and all of the King's Bench for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this family. And with that, I digress.
Well said.
Well said, Noble Greg.
We really appreciate you. You know, your time, your energy, your willingness to just be able to humble yourself and to hone into something that's foreign, but you know it's familiar. You know, when it's foreign, familiar, it gives you ability to just humble yourself, be like, what if? And that what if paid off. So thank you, brother. You know, Brother Militant from the House of Militant. Can you hear us, Ross?
You muted, Noble.
We can't hear you, Noble. Okay, so if he's not able to, so thank you everyone for homing in today, as well as all those online and all those who will be watching it online. You're in a dire position right now, and you have a choice to make. You can only serve one master, and we know the masters are those who we spoke about. You there, brother?
Oh, you forgot Brother Scott too, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brother Scott. Oh, I know it's somebody. You got the well, we're gonna beam you up now, Brother Scott. So you control the spaceship. So go on. Sound the intercom.
I really appreciate it, King.
Sorry, Noble.
Now, King, I have a question more so than a comment.
Shoot,
The title of today's service was, "What is your legality and theology?" And the whole time we're reading and listening and learning, I kept defaulting back to the separation between church and state. So I wanted to get your honest opinion on, do you think that is equivalent to what we just got through reading based on the title of today's service?
Yes, you hit it on points. Legality versus what is the legality of your theology? Is the legality of the theology of people's faith is a result of the separation of church and state. When you separate the church and state, you separate it from legality of the body of politics. So well said.
Understood. Thank you, King. I really appreciate it. I'm almost with Brother Means. I'm almost speechless. I mean, the information is just overwhelming. So hopefully it'll take me a few days to digest it, or I'll just sit in here and cry, I guess. But thank you very much for the clarity. I really appreciate you all. Thanks again.
You're welcome. And like I said, it took me a couple of days to digest what I revealed to you, because as in the scriptures and as well as what we reveal about the person called Jesus, he always said, "It's not my time." So I would like to give you what was divinely prepared to give you, but I can only give you when it's given to me. So we're never late. We're always on time. We was out of time, then that means that what we had that was past due time, but we were never received it yet. So the fact that we're receiving that was preserved through time, time that was, we were not. So what was received when we were not has been preserved. That shows you that we have always been here. So we love you, we thank you, and we need you forever in this perpetual movement. And with that, Archbishop, you got the last, Queen, you got the last word. Okay, Archbishop, you got the last word.
Well, there you have it, brothers and sisters from the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. Once again, your body politic, which is coming through the King's consciousness, is the people, and without the people, the King cannot continue to keep doing this great work. Like he said, is we must start pulling ourselves back up to the understanding of being masters. because it was masters who have maintained our history. And for us to be able to take it back, we must now become to the proper understanding of them who have became trustees, and they have gone a long time ago, but we're here in the flesh now. And so now we have no reason to say that we cannot do our work, which these people have held and reserved and preserved for us to be able to take it back in this great time right now that we must take it back for. Just look around you, like after reading that Bartlett case, it said that no church can be pretty much consecrated without a head or giving them order or license to do so. And so the English church could not have came back without the king, because the king has the highest authority for any so-called corporation, etc. here on the land that we call Crown Land, which people today misnomer as America. We have been in this twilight zone for far too long, and it's time for us to come up out of it, because if we really want to preserve the people must come out of the delusions which they have started accepting as truth. And like the scripture said, you strayed to those foreign goddesses that you know nothing about. And so the fact that you lived and strayed to those foreign gods and goddesses you knew nothing about, then it was your demise, that i.e. your transfer of your consciousness that you gave to others to be able to take your position. And now, like you said, we have been in slavery for over 400 some years plus. We tired, and we see that we are already rich, like the king have proven via the penny going back to King Edgar the Peaceful. And only way for you to be able to utilize your de jure money, you got to go back to your de jure monarchy, i.e. the king or the crown that gave you the power and the ability to be able to use that. And for those of you who was here on Thursday, Bill, for the officers, hopefully, like I said, showing the money, even with King Henry II having the Jerusalem seal on the back of it, is showing you the reason why we had to connect ourselves back to the island that you call Puerto Rico, because in essence, it's actually really the English islands or the English Channel. Anywhere, like I said, the Englishman or Englishwoman go, it's England. And in this case, Jerusalem as well. So we're one and the same. England and Jerusalem is in tandem. And we do have our King of Peace, and our King of Peace is also the Emperor or the Imperator Albionis, which is known as the Emperor of Albion, which is not just a so-called city, country, state, kingdom. Is actually the whole globe, which we call glebe in our language. Yes. So once again, like I said, start bringing yourselves up to the understanding or comprehension of what it is to know and what it to be holders of the king's consciousness, because this is a great time to be alive, and just to be able to be amongst the king retinue, is probably one of the best positions that any man or any woman today can actually be a part of. Like we said, we did walk amongst our gods, and as you see, we're walking amongst our gods and lords today.
Right now.
And like we keep saying, historically, our ancestors, we knew who are folks that we put our trust into. We saw them, we talked to them. It wasn't abstract. And today we're no longer going to live those abstract concepts, because the only thing, like our brother Gray said, it got us was pain, misery, confusion, and didn't get us anywhere. And the only way for us to get somewhere, it requires a head to point you in the right direction. And with that being said, I love you, King Clifford Jefferson, as well as Queen Godwinson, because once again, without you two, the other half of the king is to help keep the king emotionally stable for him to be able to do his part. And we know most of the time for that to happen, we need to have our other half, our spouse, our wife, the one who we can consult with whenever we're going through some of the roughest and toughest parts of our life. And I know, like I said, a lot of the stuff that the king is doing is not easy. Even the stuff that we're doing, and we're not in a position that's the king, and it's not easy. So we can only imagine, like they say, heavy is the head that wears the crown. So it's our job to help our king and assist him whatever way that we can, so that way he can continue to keep doing his job to protect us as lovely, loyal subjects. And once again, only subjects can be real people, not corporations. So with that being said, and that's case law. I'm not saying that. Case law.
Paul versus Virginia.
Yep, and the case we just read, Paul, it literally just said that. So loving subjects can only be real people. Anything else, it cannot be a subject. So with that being said, we love you, and please make sure you donate to the church. because we do remember everyone who do their part, you know, even those who not amongst the panel. Like I said, you are still doing your job to start showing yourself approved to be able to come home, because once again, we have many offices that's vacant, and only those who have the proper understanding to be in those positions are going to be able to be in it. And with that being said, we love you. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks, everyone.
Love y'all.
I saved the king.
All
Peace
right.
and love.
Yeah. Peace. Peace, brother man.